If you're using Webflow for your website and you want to do SEO, here's some of the settings you need to make sure you have on your Webflow website so it can be found properly by Google and it has the best SEO practices in mind. So if you go to your site settings on Webflow, you'll have all these tabs here. Now, first on the general tab, the name doesn't matter and the folder doesn't matter. That's to do with Webflow. Now, you want to make sure you have a favicon. You can use favicon generators. Now, it doesn't affect SEO massively, but it's still important to have. And a favicon is the thing that appears in the top left of this browser tab here, and it just adds that professionality to your website. Number 2 is a web clip. Now, again, this isn't very important for SEO, but it's worth having. It's basically the logo that will show up if somebody bookmarks your website on their iPhone, and it'll be the app icon that shows up. So again, just for that extra professionality, make sure to have one, and you can use generators online to create this. Now, your time zone, set it to the time zone of your website or business. Language code. Now, this is important because whatever language your website is in, by including this language code, it helps search engines understand the language, and it will offer options to translate it to people who aren't reading it in the native language. So make sure to include all of your language codes here, and you can click here for a list of language codes if you don't know which yours is. And obviously add multiple language codes if your site is in multiple languages. Website password, you don't need to worry about that. Again, showcase site, this is Webflow settings, you don't have to worry about that. Workspace, don't worry, and the branding, don't worry. Now, the next one, go to the publishing tab. So on the publishing tab, the first section, staging, don't worry too much about this. This is just for the test domain on Webflow, so you can leave that as it is. Now, if we go to production, this is where you add your domain name. So you want to make sure that you've got it set up to a default domain. Now, I prefer using www version, so I always make this the default. So if anybody ever visits like Corbin Creative without the www, they'll be redirected automatically to the www version. Now, this is important that you choose one of them as default. Otherwise, search engines are going to read your website twice, which will cause duplicate content. And obviously, duplicate content is bad for SEO. So make sure you set a default domain. Now, the next is 301 redirects. Now, these are very important because if you do a site migration or you change the URLs of certain pages, you want to redirect the old URL to the new one. Now, this will help search engines understand that you've moved this page and it's still active on your website, but you want to direct traffic to the new URL, not the old one. And if you don't do this properly, you can lose a lot of SEO results if you change URLs or do a site migration. So make sure you've got all the redirects set up that you need so people don't end up on broken pages of your website. And to add one, you simply, for example, let's just say I changed my web design service page. So let's just say the original was web design. So it would be corbincreative.com/web design. That was the original URL. And let's just say I changed it to corbincreative.com/web design services. I would just put web design services, and then I would add this redirect and then republish my website. Now, the next is advanced publishing options. Now, enable SSL. This is very important because it will give you that padlock at the top of the browser on your website there and make your website secure. That will build trust with your audience and build trust with search engines. So make sure you have the SSL enabled. And also, if you don't have this, people might see errors when trying to visit your website. So it's very important to enable this. And to know it's working, the site should show up with this HTTPS. That's how you know it's working properly. And you should have this padlock here and it will say the connection is secure. Now, Minify HTML, CSS, and JS. Now, these are important. Now, if you've got any complex integrations on your website, just have backups ready before you enable these because it can break your website sometimes. But if you've got a simple, easy to use website, it probably won't break your website. So make sure to enable these. This will basically speed up your website load speed, and having fast load speed is important for SEO because the quicker people can get on your website, the more likely they are to stay on it and to take action. So enable these if it doesn't break your website. And the custom SSL certificate, if you've got your own SSL certificate, you can include it in this section here, and obviously you wouldn't enable the SSL there. Now, the next tab we're going to go to is the SEO tab. So the first is indexing. Now, we want to disable the Webflow subdomain. Now, the subdomain, if I click publish here, you'll see it has the staging website and the main website. Now, this staging website is basically a test domain. You can test out new things on this and just publish it to the test domain before you go to the live site. However, we want to make sure we no index this and disable the indexing. Otherwise, search engines might pick up this content, and again, detect your site for duplicate content. So if your website is live, make sure to disable the sub-indexing on the Webflow settings. The robots.txt, this is basically telling search engines if there's parts of your website that you don't want them to crawl. Now, this is a very complex feature, and it's a lot of the time best to leave blank or as default as I've got here. So this will basically let search engines crawl every page of my website. Now, if there's certain parts of your website that you want to block off and you don't want search engines reading at all, then I would recommend using Google's guide on the robots.txt to properly implement that on your website and make sure you're doing it properly. However, for most of you, you can just do the default settings like I've got here, and obviously apply your URL and sitemap information here instead of mine. Now, the next is the sitemap. Now, this is very important because it helps Google read your website. And if you let Webflow auto-generate this, which for most of you, the auto-generate option is going to be fine. And what it does is it adds this page to your website. So you can see corbaincreative.com/sitemap.xml, and it's basically just a list of all of my pages on the website. And this is important because it helps search engines understand and read your website better. Now, there are some situations where you don't want to use the auto-generate feature. Now, if you've got no index pages on your website, like pages you don't want Google to read, you will have to uncheck this and enter your own sitemap. Now, a quick way to create your own sitemap if you need to is use the auto-generate feature. Basically, go to the sitemap page, copy and paste this, and let's just say this URL here, SEO Services Cumbria, I want to no index this page. Just remove this URL from the sitemap and then copy and paste it into here. Otherwise, if you use the auto-generate feature when you've got no index pages, you're going to get errors on the Google Search Console. So again, auto-generate is going to be good for the majority of you, but if you do have certain pages that you want to no index, you'll have to use the custom feature. So again, just auto-generate, copy the sitemap and remove the URLs that you don't want. Now, the Google Site Verification settings, this is where you will enable Google Search Console. And this is Google Search Console. It's very useful and you'll want to install it on your website because it gives you all of your SEO information. And as we mentioned before, if you go down to sitemaps, you can upload your sitemap here so Google will read your website faster. Now, Webflow have very good documentation on how to install this on your website, and it's very simple and straightforward. So follow the guidelines here to add it and integrate it to your website and add your verification code here. Now, the next is the global canonical tag URL. So this is basically telling search engines what you want the default domain and URL to be for your website. So for me, I want my HTTPS version and the www version as the default domain. And this will redirect all traffic to this domain. So if somebody goes to like your web design page, but the link to that page is like a HTTP link or a without www link, it will automatically redirect it to the correct version. And again, this just prevents duplicate content from happening, and it makes it easier for search engines to read your website. And you can click here for more information about canonical tags, and it will explain exactly what they are. Now, the next one is the Forms tab. Now, this isn't necessarily for SEO, but just make sure you got it formatted in the correct version, because obviously you want to get leads from your website and SEO. So making sure this is set up and you're receiving them correctly is good. Now, if we go on to the Integrations tab, so here you can include the Google Analytics code to your website. Again, Webflow has documentation on how to include Google Analytics, and this is important if you want to track metrics on your website. So definitely get this set up. If you're using Google Optimise for A and B testing, again, you can integrate it here. Google Maps, you can integrate your map into the Webflow website. So again, this is mainly for local businesses, but you can include that here. Facebook Pixel, if you're doing any Facebook advertisement, you can include your pixel tag here. And that is it for the Webflow setup for SEO. So this is basically covering the general settings for your site settings on Webflow and having the best SEO practices in mind. So make sure you implement all these on your Webflow website so you can see better results on Google and with SEO. And for those of you interested, I've got a SEO course available for Webflow where I cover all these topics and dive deeper into the best SEO practices for your Webflow website. I'll leave the link in the description if you want to check it out.